Gundam 00 is in a weird spot for me. I can wholeheartedly say it's a good show. Decent characters, sensible plot, overall enjoyable action. However, I'll admit, it isn't really for me. Most of what it does was either done better in other series, or is based around concepts common to the franchise I'm not the biggest fan of. I enjoyed my time with it, do not get me wrong. However, I was never truly engaged. If 00 was my introduction to Gundam, I'd have probably loved it. Since it wasn't though, I don't. In fact, I found myself wishing I could watch the show that was hidden within the series itself. I wish more focus was placed upon Patrick, Graham, Smirnov, and the rest of Celestial Being's antagonists. At least, those who are decent people. This wish, as weird as it sounds, helped me realize why 00 never truly engaged me. This series is a style of Gundam I don't like. However, it was done in such a manner that I can still find some enjoyment. Before diving into that, however, I want to touch on a few different things I often go over in these sorts of videos, namely the mecha design. I love the grunts for every faction. They have a rickety yet functional look to them, which works well in contrast to the Gundams. The machines, true to what we're shown, are completely outclassed. They look as if they could work here in the modern day, or near future, which makes it clear that war and the world is changing. It adds to the idea that Celestial Being and its Gundams are a force of nature, so to speak. Will note though, save for the flag and all of its variants, which I simply like, I think most of the grunt designs are downright ugly. However, I respect them for that fact. There's a point to why they look as they do. They make the upgrade to the Jinx and in turn the creation of the Federation all the more pronounced. The Gundams themselves, however, are a different story, and tie back into 00 being a style of Gundam I'm simply not the biggest fan of. From a sheer design standpoint, this show is one of the best examples of one-off suits I've seen. Though they have different parts and optics which each lend themselves to different roles, the Gundams, at their core, are the same machine. This fact allows me to suspend my disbelief and accept they were created by the same group. Also helps I just generally like how they look. Bearing that in mind, I absolutely hate how they are framed. For a while now, I've had no problem with Zeta, X, and IBO having one-of-a-kind suits. However, I couldn't quite figure out why until rather recently. In those three shows, the mobile suits are better than their competition, sure, however the gap in performance wasn't absurdly massive. A good pilot in a grunt suit could still be a genuine threat on its own. In 00, however, this is never really the case. The Gundams outclass everything to such an absurd degree with crazy abilities that I sorta check out of the fights. There is no tension or stakes a lot of the time, so I simply don't care. They feel more like super robots fighting real robots, as opposed to a better real robot going up against something not quite as good, if that makes any sense. Having said that, I'm going to contradict myself slightly. Though I don't like the approach 00 takes with the Gundams, I appreciate it all the same. It's a weird position to be in because though the machine's presentation took away from my enjoyment, I respect how that very idea was integral to the plot. The Gundams revolutionized warfare and led to the creation of the Jinxes. Since 00 is an era of transition, of development and growth for mankind as a whole, the approach I generally don't like makes sense. It plays a role in demonstrating said growth, especially come Season 1's end. Think of it this way. I like what 00 did, despite disliking the approach as a whole because there was a point to it, unlike Seed, where it's just an excuse for the main character to defeat everything with ease. I'm sorry, I had to. If anything, this issue is just a matter of taste, something you'll be hearing quite often from here on out. This idea isn't uncommon for the franchise, but I simply don't like it. Having said that, 00's execution of said idea was rather well done, allowing me to still find some enjoyment. The battle where the Throne Gundams show up, where the Allied forces wear down the Gundam Meisters, was really clever and entertaining. Now, moving on to the characters themselves. Everyone in the cast is well written and has meaningful arcs. Setsuna starts off as detached and a bit murderous, shall we say. and ends as one who wants to become a savior, a Gundam. A line which out of context was really stupid. Now that I understand, alright 00, well played. And all of this development and change results in Setsuna finding a newfound passion which emerges during the finale. It's something that was really cool to watch. Tiaria, I butchered that name, I'm not even going to try again, is high-strung by the book but changes for the better after he and his worldview breaks down. Alleluia, a character I thought I'd dislike or be annoyed by on account of the split personality thing, is just a good dude with some baggage. Well, a lot of baggage. Sumeragi is Misato in a less depressing series, which is always nice to see, and her crew are well-rounded with moments of their own. Almost no one breaks the mold in this show, but it's fine. 00 isn't as character-driven as other series because it's trying to do other things. It doesn't have the time, yet it makes use of what it has. Every important character changes in a meaningful way, which doesn't feel ham-fisted, and it's great. Having said that, I do prefer series which spend more time with its characters than 00 did. Series like X and even Zeta. I don't fault the show for its approach, but it is, again, not to my taste. It's just the inherent nature of a series where the focus is on the characters and how they change the setting, as opposed to how the setting changes the characters. You inherently don't get as much time with these characters as other series because, again, more ground has to be covered, more things addressed. Still on the topic of characters though, I do want to know how awesome Lockon is. He's like Jamil Neat from X in the sense that I wish he was in another series. I don't want him removed from 00, quite the contrary. I just want him in more things. I want that archetype to just be spread about everywhere. He's such a great presence on screen, an interesting dude. I want to spend more time with him. When surrounded by a super soldier and what are essentially two new types, at least I think, I haven't gotten to season 2 yet, Lockon is the only normal individual among the Gundam Meisters, yet he can still keep up. He's the most human out of the group, at least among the pilots, and has a generally fascinating outlook on life. He's aware of the hypocrisy behind his actions and is prepared to suffer the consequences of what he's done once he's changed the world he so desperately hates. When confronted with the knowledge that Setsuna, someone he took under his wing, his friend, was a part of the group who killed his family, he snaps. Lockon gets angry, understandably so, but moves on. He forgives him because at his core, though he kills, he's a good man. I guess what I'm trying to get at here is, Lockon has something a lot of the cast seems to lack, and actually, a lot of characters in Gundam in general seem to lack. A presence. There's just something about him which allows him to steal every scene he's in. Now, this is a slightly abrupt change of pace, but for most of 00's fights, I tuned out, as I've stated previously. However, every moment of Lockon's duel with Sanchez, a man who has an amazing English dub voice, was riveting. It hooked me good, and is one of the most intense battles I've ever seen in the entire franchise. This sentiment holds true for his death as well, only to be barely beat out by Amuro's, though that may one day change. It was that good. I'll be honest, I never knew a Haro could make me feel so depressed. Bringing this back to what I said at the start of the video, 00 is a style of Gundam I'm not a fan of. For all intents and purposes, you can separate each entry of the franchise into one of two camps. Either A, the focus is how the setting changes the characters. Think Mobile Suit Gundam, Zeta, and most One Year War series. Or B, the focus is how the characters change the setting. Think Seed, 00, and probably Wing from what I've gathered. I'll get to it eventually. There's also a few small outliers like X and IBO which lie in between the two, with X being closer to A, since they're dealing with the after-war era as a whole, as well as the remnants of the old governments, and IBO being closer to B. The characters' actions change the setting, but they're mostly powerless and aren't the driving force behind said change. They simply help facilitate it, one way or another. These two styles each have their place and allow for different types of storytelling. The first way of doing things is more character-centric, with the second being more focused on the world as a whole. By its very nature, the second approach has to spend a lot of time with the setting's politics, how they change, and the populace's overall reaction to the actions of its cast. There's often less focus upon the characters because other ideas are being explored. Personally, when it comes to mecha, I like it when things are more personal. I like seeing how the setting impacts the characters far more than the characters impacting the setting. To me, it usually, there's an asterisk there, undercuts the idea that war is meaningless if things can suddenly and drastically change on a large scale on account of the actions of a few. Bearing that in mind, I am more than willing to give a series leeway in this regard, so long as they do in fact do their own thing, like 00, and not crib from previous entries in the series, like Seed. I like it when Gundam is a story about war, about the little people caught in the crossfire. Those are the series I gravitate toward, what's to my liking. 00 is a good series. It's self-aware and stays true to the core idea that lies at the franchise's heart. War is bad, so we should all try to avoid it with cooperation and understanding, while also doing its own thing. It has a different approach from what I generally like, so it isn't to my taste. I like it, but I wouldn't go out of my way for more. I think I like Graham, Patrick, Smirnov, and the rest more because they're the ones who are changing with the setting. Things are out of their control, as opposed to being the ones changing it. I wish the show had its focus on them, placed more attention upon their journey, because it's closer to what I like. It's not because I detest Celestial Being. In fact, I actually like the organization. It's weird and interesting. Unlike Seed, their hypocrisy is highlighted, plays a critical role in the plot, and is ultimately punished. However, I like the plot of the antagonists more, at least the ones who are decent people, because it's more in line with my tastes. 00 does a lot well, and is a great introduction for those who want to get into mecha and Gundam both. However, it just wasn't for me. I respect it as its own thing. It's an enjoyable enough romp. However, I don't know if I'll rewatch it as often as I do for, say, Zeta. It's a good series, entertaining with strong writing and characters. However, the show is very premise. Its style was the opposite of what I look for in Gundam. And honestly, I'm alright with that. I don't want the franchise to be the same thing all the time. It's why I like IBO and X as much as I do. So long as the core message is kept, which in this case it is, I'm more than fine with it. 00 is good, it's fun, and if it's your favorite, I can certainly see why. For me, it just wasn't my favorite flavor of Gundam. But with that said, guys, I've been Bufar191. Tell me what you thought in the comments down below. There will probably be a video for Season 2. I have not started it yet, so I don't know. If I can't find anything to talk about, there won't be. So just a bit of a heads up, since this was actually kind of difficult, because 00 is pretty alright, and a lot of things I've seen in it, I've seen in other places. That's not a bad thing, and from how I understand it, that was kind of the point of Gundam, or rather 00, it was to reintroduce it to a new generation, and in that regard, it succeeds tremendously. Good job. Yeah, so, I've been Boo, I'll see all you next time, goodbye.